Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. My name is Huang. I'm a product manager on the Android TV team, and this is John Affaki, one of the engineering managers on the Google Cast team. So today we're here to talk to you about developing compelling applications for the home, particularly in the living room. Hopefully, you guys are all in the right place. So over the past couple years, Google has been building out an ecosystem of devices to make it just easier for you to take your existing apps and extend them to all living room devices. So we started with the launch of Chromecast, the first endpoint of Google Cast. So Google Cast has since extended to the Android TV platform, a platform we've built that extends Android to smart TVs and set-top boxes. And finally, Google Cast for Audio, which extends the reach of apps beyond televisions and to speakers. So then we'll talk a little bit about the opportunity space and why you should be paying attention at all to the living room. Hopefully, it's not a huge surprise, but good to go over that. We'll then move on to the anatomy of Android TV and Cast applications, how to build them, how to make it, and how we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you guys. And then finally, we'll talk about making your app more discoverable and just ways for you guys to increase engagement. All right, so sorry about that. So let's start with what we're doing and what our goals are in the living room. So we want to enable sort of rich experiences on the wide range of home entertainment devices. But yet we don't want to be another attempt at the living room. A lot of people have tried different things here, and it can be tough. And we want to make it easier for you. So we understand that not every user is the same. Their homes, living rooms, their setups are very different. And hardware manufacturers manufacture a lot of different types of products. So we think that it's really important to give both users and consumers, OEMs and developers, different options to get into the living room. So in order to reach that goal, we built out Google Cast and Android TV. So these are two complementary ways to build applications for your users. Both take advantage of the work that you've already done, particularly on mobile and on your existing phone and tablet apps, to bring that to the full living room device ecosystem. So for those of you that don't know, Chromecast is a small HDMI dongle. It enables any television, whether it's smart or it's not, to run applications and get your content onto the big screen. And it does so by extending your mobile applications so that it's communicating with the television. All the interaction happens on your phone or your tablet or even your web browser. And you can build where you're building the rich interactive experiences and you're not intruding on what's going to be on screen. So we've been really happy with the success of Chromecast. In fact, it was the #1 selling streaming device last year, outselling all other devices in that category combined. So we attribute a lot of that success to just how simple the interaction model is. People are already familiar with using these apps on their phones, right? Like you're using them all the time. And we take advantage of that. Users are going to be familiar with that, and you just cast that to the big screen. So with the launch of Chromecast, our goal was to introduce that interaction to the world, and it's really taken off. Users are clicking that cast button like crazy, so over 1.5 billion times just on the Chromecast device itself. And since launch, the overall use per device is up 66%. So given the way Google works, we think a lot about ecosystems. We wanted to open up that functionality and extend it to different device manufacturers so we could create this Google Cast ecosystem. All right, so the other device ecosystem that we'll be talking about today is, and that Google is driving, and we've been doing for several years now, is Android. So at Google I/O last year, we launched the Android TV platform, which brings together Cast, Play, and traditional television, and we extend Android to these new form factors. So we're extending Android to several form factors. We talked about cars and watches last year as well, and making that sort of running that connection across all of these different types of devices. So by doing this, people are already familiar with Android, both the combination of how to develop for the platform as well as how you deploy apps. And so we're just extending that. And that's when we talk about making it easy, that's really what we're trying to do. You're already familiar with all of those things, so we just want to extend that to all the different form factors. Since the launch of the platform last year, we launched the Nexus Player device for Android TV back in November. And that was really just a start. We're seeing a lot more smart TVs and set-top boxes that are launching this year. So just this month, Sony launched their 2015 line of Bravia televisions that you can find in store now. running Android TV. And then NVIDIA and Razer have launched their new entertainment devices. We've also seen pay TV operators, so these are the boxes that deliver sort of pay TV content into homes, launching, several of them are launching around the world, and there's more coming. On the app side, we're seeing a lot of new apps coming to the platform, both traditional names from sort of more traditional TV like CBS, Fox, and HBO, as well as streaming content from like Vimeo and Epix. So all of these partners, both across apps and hardware, they share this vision that we have of a better living room user experience. I think all of us have suffered through just lots of remote controls or difficult TV UI, and we want to do better. And not only that, we want to take the existing experience of traditional television and merge that seamlessly with the open apps and games ecosystem. So beyond native apps and games, every Android TV also supports Cast. So which means that all the apps that you guys have already built for Chromecast, they'll just work on Android TV. You'll be able to cast to them without any additional work. All right, so we love watching TV and playing games on the big screen, but home entertainment goes beyond displays. So earlier this year at CES, we announced the Google Cast for Audio program, which extends that Cast ecosystem that we've talked about to speakers and soundbars. And again, there's just no modifications needed to take your app and bring it to these new devices. So Sony and LG were the first to launch their speakers. But as with Android TV devices, we have many more announced and many more coming. We have over 17 million Chromecast devices out there, and expect to have tens of millions of Cast-enabled devices in Android TVs by the end of this year. So with Android TV and Google Cast, there really isn't a room in the house that you as developers can't reach. All right, so why should you care? We have these solutions that we just talked about, but what problem are we trying to solve? So first off, some stats. There are 200 million new televisions sold every year worldwide. And not only that, there are a lot of televisions already out there, somewhere around 2 billion of them by our estimates. The majority of them don't have internet connectivity, which means they don't have any sort of ability to do much beyond sort of receiving a signal and putting it back on screen. People use them a ton, though. In the US, they're on for an average of about 5 hours a day. And they're right now using them for what I'll call traditional TV, sort of watching whether it's through a pay TV box or over the air through the antenna, or they're playing games on their consoles. Beyond this traditional television, though, streaming video has been growing like gangbusters. And what we found is that rather than cannibalizing that traditional television watch time, people are just watching more content. They have so many choices now, they're just watching more and more stuff, being entertained in new and more delightful ways. And they're mixing both of these two things. For many families, sitting down around the big screen to watch, whether it's sporting events, go Warriors, if there are any Warriors fans out there. Not very many, I guess. Their favorite sitcoms, or torturing themselves watching the Kardashians, that guy, is a very social event. YouTube, Netflix, and Hulu are also products that just have become household names in the streaming space. And this started on desktop and mobile, but it only makes sense that they're also going to be on the TV screen. So if you have an application that delivers content, there's great opportunity for you here. And hopefully that's why you're all here. So here's some data that we found to illustrate that opportunity. So we see an increase of a 45% increase in overall watch time on YouTube across all devices for users who start casting to a Chromecast. So that's a little bit of a mouthful. So what we're finding is that just overall YouTube usage, across whatever form factors, once someone has gotten a Chromecast, just starts increasing. And there's 3 reasons that we've attributed to that. So first is when you share the experience of a music video, it's so much easier on a television than when you're all going to be crowded around a phone. The second is that if you're going to watch extended amounts of anything, it's just a lot easier if you're going to do it around a TV rather than on a mobile device. And the third is that watching it on a TV enables scenarios like party queues, for example, where everyone can sort of queue up different content for the screen. And these things just aren't possible on a mobile device. The other thing that we found is that the bigger the screen size, the more time people spend on them. And this applies to both Cast and Android TV. At the rate phones are growing, however, so next year's 75-inch Nexus phone might be the most engaging screen in your house. You didn't hear that here. And that was also a joke. Please don't tweet that. So 100-inch Nexus phone. Starting with your existing Android or iOS application and leveraging the big screen, you're going to increase engagement, which will just increase the overall opportunities and revenue opportunities that you have. So given that streaming and digital downloads is how most people are enjoying their music today, it's surprising we haven't seen that much of an evolution in how people are listening to music. So in the US, people are listening to an average of about 4 hours per day of audio. So that's quite a lot combined with that TV figure. So headphones are great when you're listening to music on a bus, but in the home, it doesn't really make sense. You want to be more unencumbered. And so Bluetooth and Bluetooth speakers have started to bridge that gap, and you're starting to see some change in that. But there's still pretty significant drawbacks there. Besides sort of the lower audio quality that you get from it, it relies on the smarts being all sort of on your phone or on your mobile device. It has to be on. It has to be within range. So with Google Cast for Audio, all of that processing happens on the Cast device. So you can throw your phone out the window. Please don't actually do that. And any other device can now pick up and control that music. So you can create really interesting applications here, like virtual DJs, where everyone puts their favorite songs on, or build features that take advantage of the mobile device and drive revenue, such as like interactive or contextual ads. So all of your favorite music apps available on Cast just work on Cast speakers. So you can take your Pandora, your Google Play Music, your iHeartRadio to that next level. All right, so we talked about building out that ecosystem and why we think there's an opportunity here. But a lot of people have tried this. A lot of different companies have tried to introduce custom development models and forcing developers to build these apps that will really only work in a single device ecosystem. This has led to a lot of fragmentation, both in sort of the development platform as well as the payment platforms. And the challenge that we see is that it's really stifling to innovation. We kind of see it like smartphones before Android and iOS. What's happening is that instead of really focusing on building amazing experiences, you're more worried about, oh shoot, how am I going to get the service on these types of devices and this type of device and 20 other platforms that are out there. And not only that, a lot of these new platforms, you have to start from scratch. It's something completely unfamiliar for a lot of developers. So our goal with our open ecosystem for the living room is really trying to bring some sanity and scale to that. Just leverage existing platforms, again, like Android, iOS, web, and the development practices you already know and love. So our hope is you can take that existing mobile app and just expand them to the living room. So to tell you a little bit more about what that means, John is going to talk about building apps for Google Cast and Android TV.
Thanks. So we've talked a lot about the devices, so let's talk a little bit about what it takes to build those apps. So our goal, as Alan said, is to make it as easy as possible for you to dive into building applications for the living room. So we're going to start by talking about Android TV first, because that's pretty much straightforward for any of you guys who've already built Android apps. The reason it's straightforward is because Android TV is just Android. It's the same APIs, same development model, and same distribution model. The biggest difference with these apps is how your users interact with them and how they watch the content. So that means that you need to do some small tweaks to your application to deal with the different form factor. So instead of being touchscreens like most Android devices, users interact with Android TVs using either a remote control or a game controller. And that has a 4-way D-pad with center click, a back button, a home button. You can also use voice to drive data entry, or use voice commands like play Beyonce. So because of that interaction model, building a UI for remote control is a little bit different. Instead of a user being able to touch pretty much anywhere on the screen, you have to be able to support scrolling or tabbing through the controls on the screen. So if you've built apps, your Android apps with accessibility in mind or keyboard support, you're already kind of there. But if you haven't, please do. Accessibility is important. So another big difference in these applications is that your users are essentially leaning back and sitting 10 feet away. We talk about the 10 feet UI. And so even though the big screen is, well, the screen is much bigger than on a phone, you're really going to be tempted to cram a lot of information on that screen, but don't, really. Your users do not want to read walls of text on television. They really want to see cinematic action, smooth transitions, and the reality is they have a beautiful TV that they've spent a lot of money on, and they want to see their content all the time, uninterrupted. It's not a phone, it's not a computer, so any kind of complex interaction is going to turn them off and frustrate them. So as a developer, you're going to build your apps, and you're going to deploy them like pretty much any other application that you do through the Play Developer Console. But in this case, you're going to opt in to having them deployed to the television. So in order to make sure that the users don't end up with a really frustrating experience, we do manually review that every application works well on televisions, instead of being like a touchscreen app that you try to make it run on the TV. So in order to help you deal with those differences, we've actually introduced a library that we call the Lean Back Support Library. It brings you some great fragments to help you deal with the navigation experiences that most of the media applications that you would build for televisions use, such as and they support all the animations, the navigation, the D-pad support, without you needing to do any work. Here's an example of one of the fragments. This is the Daily Motion app that uses the browse fragment, and it showcases videos in smooth scrolling categories. And in this fragment, on the far left, you can actually also optionally use the fast lane, which will provide you an overview of all the categories that are available. Now, after browsing from the browse fragment, it's pretty natural to click on something and go into the details fragment. So here's an example of the details fragment in the Plex app for one of my favorite TV shows, Big Bang Theory. And what that allows you to do is essentially pick actions that are associated with that detail. Again, all of that's done by the detail fragment. Now, with Android M, we're introducing a new version of the detail fragment. And we saw the detail fragment in the previous slide. This is a full bleed version of it. Now, both this one and the existing one are customizable to show whatever kind of content, so custom actions related to the content that you want to see. So, for example, if you want to put more, this particular version of the fragment highlights actions such as buy, rent, and add to wish list, rather than the metadata, which is highly visible in the previous one. So you'd use this one if you wanted to focus more on that. Now, also, when you're browsing, another common destination is going to be playback. So here's an example of the playback fragment in the YouTube app, which provides two primary actions here: rewind, play, fast forward. But you can pretty much customize the actions based off of what your application supports. And then you can also see secondary actions, such as below on the suggestion section, where you could provide more rows to provide more related information, or as we have here, suggestions for content. Now, browsing is likely going to be what users are doing when they're leaning back and deciding what to watch, clicking through mindlessly. But sometimes users use search, and actually it's fairly common. And for that case, we actually provide the search fragment. And that has built-in voice support, as you can see here. We've got a little microphone icon at the top left. And this is another example from Daily Motion, which shows up when a user's actually clicked on search. And we have full support for instant search results as the user's typing. And this is actually, uses exactly the search, the same APIs that you would implement for search and data APIs that you would use for your Android app on mobile or on your phone or tablet. So finally, with the latest release of the support library in April, we introduced the guided step fragment. And with Android M, we have an updated version. And this updated version essentially, this fragment allows you to walk through multi-step flows like setup or sign up. And you now have the option to show previous steps. So if you see here, we've got the multiple steps getting to picture mode. And you can, or you could choose to show only, I guess, the latest step, the current step. Now, this allows you to also overlay it over content. Remember, I said the users do not want to see as they're watching content, they don't want it uninterrupted. This allows you to deal with overlays, and you can tweak settings in real time without with the user being able to keep watching their Kardashians. So as we talked about also, a huge part of the Android ecosystem is gaming, in addition to media. And with powerful Android TV entertainment devices by NVIDIA and Razer, we're seeing all sorts of really amazing games being built. Some of them you can see in the sandbox area today. But like phones, the Android TV device ecosystem has a variety of hardware that supports many flavors of games. Now, we see that addictive and casual games are really exploding the size and diversity of the gamer audience. And many of those games, many of the best games there on TV span all possible Android TV devices. Now again, because this is Android and you have access to Google Play Games, you have access to the full array of features that brings you, and that you also have when developing games for mobile. So just being able to track and player achievements, save games and resume on another device, browse player profiles. But you can also build multiplayer games using the Nearby Connections API. And that allows you to find nearby phones and other Android devices that are nearby or on the same network. Now, this allows you to deal with both phone-to-phone multiplayer, but also use your phone and communicate with the Android TV device to act as a controller. So while it might be easy to think of that Android TV equals TV shows, movies, and games, you'd really be missing out on the opportunity to build some really great interactive experiences. As an example, I love to cook, and you can see it's not particularly practical to cook it with a tablet. Well, that's not me, just FYI. So I'm really excited to see interactive cooking apps that'll walk me through complex recipe. Now, I know Alan's crazy about karaoke, but I heard him sing, so please, no karaoke apps. So you can learn more about developing for Android TV by checking out the dev bites that are getting posted online and going to developers.android.com/TV. Now remember that you can also develop for Android TV the same way that you would for a Chromecast or any other Google Cast device. So let's talk a little bit about the Cast development model. Now when we looked at the living room for Cast, it was very important for us to look at what the typical household's like or wants. It'd be very easy for us to stand some ground and limit our reach to Android devices, but we really wanted to build an ecosystem that supported choice, particularly non-homogeneous households. And we know that many of you guys use fruity devices, so it was important for us to support both Android and iOS. And for those of you guys who are using laptops or desktop to interact with your TV, we have full integration with Chrome. Now, if there are any iOS developers out there who are watching, who are worried about the fact that iOS is not a high use case for us, well, roughly half of our mobile usage with Cast is iOS. So out of the 1.5 billion Casts, you've got, well, whatever, 40% of that is iOS. So there's plenty of usage on iOS. So it's a great opportunity for you to deal with your multi-platform apps on Cast. So now, as Alan mentioned earlier, Cast is really about extending the mobile experience onto the television or speakers. So that basically means that development for Cast is about multi-endpoint development. So you now have two components to your application. One that runs on your Google Cast device, such as your Chromecast, your Android TV, or your speakers, and we'll call that the receiver application. And one that runs on your mobile device, which is the sender application. Now, both of those things are connected by the Google Cast SDK, which allows your sender application to discover, connect to, and communicate with your receiver application. So with that, let's start talking about the receiver application. So the receiver application is a small web application that runs directly on the Google Cast device. And that's what the user sees. It's what outputs the video to the TV or the sound to the speakers. So for simple media apps, we provide actually a default player to which you can send most video or audio formats without writing a single line of code. But you can also make simple customizations to it, such as skinning, by just using CSS and providing us with a custom CSS. Now, for richer applications, you could build your own application the same way that you would build a small web page, which is basically host your own HTML and JavaScript, except that you'd add the Cast SDK to it. Once the Cast SDK is integrated, you can now send and receive commands to that web application from your sender application. Now, if you're playing back media that uses Dash, smooth streaming, or HLS, or any kind of DRM that we support, the Cast SDK also provides a rich media player, which makes playback of that content on any Cast device an absolute cinch. So within that receiver, you also have access to the device's properties. Just like Android has properties, Cast devices have properties. One of those properties, for example, is whether or not there's a display. Really, there's not much point spending 2 or 3 seconds showing a splash screen on your speaker. So you probably want to make sure that you skip that part. Now, remember, essentially, when we talked about Android TV, we talked about the simplicity of development and keeping it simple for the user. And so you want to use the screen the same way that we talked about, which is keeping it useful for the things that it's great at, which is rendering content, not very much data. If you want complex interaction or a lot more data, that's when your sender application comes in. So the sender application is what your users interact with, and you're pretty much quite familiar with them. It's your typical Android, iOS, or web application, which you could either build from scratch, or if you already have one that you're looking to extend to the TV, you can use that. They're developed exactly the same way as you would develop them if they weren't cast enabled, except you include the cast SDK to send messages to your receiver application. Now, this is great for your users because they don't need to learn a new kind of user interface. If they know how to use your app without cast, they know how to use it with cast. So once you integrate the cast SDK, you can see an example here with Play Music and Play Movies, the cast icon shows up, and once the user clicks that, it'll basically provide a device picker to pick a cast device to connect to. And once that's done, your receiver application gets launched on the cast device, and you can now send commands back and forth between the two. Now, we provide the ability to send specifically formatted messages, such as media commands, with our media namespace. And those are commands like play, pause, seek, volume, stream volume. We now recently introduced the Game Manager APIs, which will allow you to send custom messages for games. But we also say, well, we don't know exactly what you're building for everything, so we allow you to pass back and forth any kind of generic commands for any kind of application that you might think of. So the thing that you have to also keep in mind is that in this case, your mobile device is a lot more than a simple remote control, because with the cast model, you can really enable some cool experiences that you wouldn't be able to do with a traditional D-pad remote control. A great example of that is the MLB at Bat application. It takes advantage of the big screen to display beautiful content, high def, there. So I'm a big baseball fan, and one of the reasons I love baseball is because I love stats. But at the same time, when I'm watching a game, I really don't want those stats on the screen. I want to see the game. So in this case, using the MLB app, it's great because I can watch the game on the screen, but then get play-by-play analysis on my tablet while I'm watching the game without any interruption. Now, the other thing that you have to remember is that in this case, your remote control is a rich device, and it's got a touch screen, a camera, a speaker, a gyroscope. And it's also likely that if you've got multiple people in the room with you, they probably also have one in their pocket. So they bring their own controller in this case. And we're seeing many developers leveraging the features of mobile devices to build some really innovative apps and games. One of the great examples that you can see today in the area outside is a game called FitFlap. It's a fitness game that really proves that pigs can already fly, so no matter what they tell you. And the way that it works is it takes advantage of the camera on your phone, the front-facing camera, and it captures motion and basically looks at your movements to detect when you want your pigs to flap their wings or various actions. So you could go and try it out. Now, FitFlap's not the only game we have for cast. In fact, many of our partners have launched games over the last few months. We've brought some popular classics like Wheel of Fortune, Monopoly Dash, but we've also brought a little bit more high action and heart-pumping action with Just Dance Now. Now, they're just great examples of games that you could be building. And so this week, we announced the Google Cast Games Manager API for the SDK, which makes it a lot easier to introduce cast into your games. And it manages game state, player state, and communications with the cast device. We're launching with that. We're showing a bunch of games that are using these APIs in the area upstairs, and you'll be able to download them from the Play Store or the App Store soon. One of those is Catchphrase Blitz. It's kind of interesting to walk by the section upstairs, and you hear a lot of yelling, and they're all playing this game, so it's a very passionate game. So also, with these games, you can also remember that just like Android TV, you're building your games mostly on the mobile device, so you have access to all the features that Play Games provides you. So everything that you could do building a game mobile, you can also extend here. So really building rich multiplayer games is absolutely easy on either Android TV or Cast. And so also, with the technologies that I just described, you can see that we're really trying to leverage your existing expertise of well-established platforms with either Android, iOS, or web development for the senders. And then we have a small extra thing, which is the HTML app for the receiver. So there isn't much new to learn here. But with all that, there's still some times when you want to stick to native development, even for the things that are running on the Cast device. So we launched the remote display APIs for both Android and iOS. And so with that, you can now actually build all of your UI natively, draw to a hidden canvas, and have that rendered directly on the Google Cast device, which allows you to provide some rich, fast-paced action on the TV taking advantage of the really powerful CPU and GPU that you have in your pocket. Now, a great example of that is Autodesk Pixlr, which gives you the ability to do real-time editing of your photos on your phone and renders the output on the TV. And that way, you could either everybody in the room or you could see the beautiful photo and what the outcome of that edit would be without being obstructed by the controls that you'd see on your phone. So Pixlr is a great app, but the remote display feature is also particularly relevant to gaming, where many of your assets might be shared between what you'd show on your phone and what you'd show on the screen. And we've had Android mirroring for a while, and that was good, but fairly limited for gaming. But it was important for us to give iOS developers access to the processing power of those phones. Whether you can use Metal, you can use OpenGL, or you can even take UIKit and specify a surface and provide your audio to the Cast SDK. And the Cast SDK will essentially encode, stream, and render whatever that surface was on the Cast device. And you can really enable some great experiences. Now, FitFlap, that I talked about a bit, was developed using a remote display. But you can also check out a few other great examples, such as Ubisoft's Driver or Rollicula's Motion Tennis on Android and iOS. And you'll be able to find them if you're not at the Sandbox area on your mobile stores pretty soon. So you can get a lot more information about developing for gaming with Google in many of the online videos that will be posted with the I/O batch. And you can find out a lot more about development for applications for Chromecast, Cast for audio, as well as Android TV in our dev bytes at developers.google.com/cast. So, Alan?
Cool. So now that you've built your app, how do you help people find it? To be frank, your beautiful, amazing, fluid teleportation app, it's pretty useless if no one actually ever finds it. So for Google Cast, since the interaction with the users on the mobile device, the way people find the app is pretty familiar. It's how people are finding your app on mobile phones already. Millions of users a month go to g.co/castapps. It's a mouthful. g.co/castapps, which will list out all the Cast applications and filterable by the different mobile platforms. You can also filter based on whether or not it's something optimized for an audio device. On Android, you can find your Cast apps in the Google Play Store, in the Cast section there in the category view. And on iOS, you'll find the apps in the App Store. We've got some fun, exciting stuff to enhance Cast app discovery coming up later this year, so stay tuned. App discovery on Android TV is similar to how you're thinking about it on other Android devices. What you're doing is you're still distributing to over 100 countries through the Play Developer Console and uploading your app there. So your app is then available on Android TV devices and found in the Play Store on television. We're rolling out a big update to our TV Play Store in this coming week, next week, to better expose the hundreds of apps and games on TV to users, introduce browsing via a wide set of categories, as well as sort of top apps and games. Once users have found your app, you'll want them to engage and use your app. So obviously, the content that your app provides is the #1 most important thing, but there's more to it than that. So Android TV provides a couple surfaces for you to expose your great content, helping users get entertained. And so when users are at home, they're sitting down on their couch. They don't really want to think too hard about this. So that's why we've made the recommendation row the first thing you see on the home screen. Just a couple days ago, I saw the new Taylor Swift video that everyone's talking about as the first slot. And so we've introduced new recommendation guidelines that we'll be publishing to our developer site. And with M, we'll have several APIs so that you can classify your recommendations better, and as well as helper modules for you guys to refresh your recommendations and just make them more engaging for users. The two most important things are just how often people are using your app, as well as how often people are clicking your recommendations. And those are the things that determine the ranking order of the recommendation row. So another surface on TVs that we haven't talked that much about yet is just the traditional TV and channels experience. This is where people today are spending 4 to 5 hours a day channel surfing. There's something really powerful. You sit down at home, you flip on the TV, you're in the middle of an episode of a show or middle of a movie, and people will still sit down and just keep watching. And like we mentioned before, Android TV is really about bringing together that traditional television and that streaming content seamlessly without having to wait a while to switch inputs, et cetera. So at home, when I'm watching the NBA playoffs, I'll often cast YouTube clips of great plays during the commercials. And what if there were a channel, though, that just had 30-second clips of great plays happening all the time that I could just flip to? So live channels is how we're going to do that on Android TV. So what are live channels? I really think of it as cats 24/7. I'm pretty sure that's what everyone really needs and wants. All right, so can we switch to the demo? Or the screen? All right, cool. So developers can publish these channels to something we call the TV input framework. And so it's just a part of your application, and you publish sort of the video content and stream, as well as metadata about what's available there. And then these get exposed in the TV app that's going to be available, the TV app that's going to be on all Android TV devices. So on Nexus players, the NVIDIA device, the Razer device, what you'll find is the Live Channels app that we've built. And so this is your standard TV experience. Oh, it's a little frozen. And so when there are new channels that have been installed, you can go to new channels. I find that there's some new channels there available. And it will start loading them and adding them to that program guide. So there are now 113 channels available. All right, so when I go back to the program guide, you actually find all of these new channels, so tons of these music channels available in that guide. So the TV input framework, it's going to be available on all Android TV devices. And these new channels that are creating great sort of streaming content, they will get exposed. So you can see it on the Sony TVs upstairs, alongside sort of your antenna feeds. And you'll also see on paid TV boxes, you'll see these alongside all your paid TV channels. And now it's just a channel switch away. When you're channel surfing, that experience is just right there. Cool. Can we switch back to slides? So we have several partners that we've worked with really closely to publish out these initial channels that are going to be available on Play Store today. And we have a lot more coming. We see I just showed Pluto TV. There's also Zuzu by France TV. So lots of different content from a lot of different places. We'll have more coming soon as we start rolling this out for more consumers. All right, back to John.
Other one.
Yep.
So speaking of channels, in traditional broadcast TV, after you finish watching a show, the next one starts, and the next one, and the next one. Once I get started, I can get stuck on HGTV for hours. And the reason that happens is because there's really no friction for me to keep watching what interests me, whether it's the next episode of something or something that really I'm interested in. So Red Bull TV just introduced a feature that we call autoplay, where they create a personalized virtual channel of content to watch once you pick one video. And it keeps going and going and going. And so we've introduced this feature on multiple partners so far. And after introducing it, we see average session lengths with those applications increased by over 15% for those partners. So it's something that you really want to consider if you've got a media application. Now, to help you build that feature, we introduced queuing and autoplay functionality in the Cast SDK, which makes it really easy for you to create playlists, but also automatically starts buffering the next piece of media before the current one ends, so that the transition between these items is not a 30-second buffering time. It's pretty much instant. Now, on Android TV, you can already build similar functionality using the queuing APIs and Media Router. So basically, with those two features, building your own TV or audio channels never been easier. Now, with autoplay, we see that reducing user friction increases user engagement. Another source of friction is things that I'll call computery steps. A good example of computery step is sign-in. No one wants to sign in into their television. Now, we launched Smart Lock Passwords with this release of Google Play Services. And if you integrate Smart Lock Passwords into your application, your credentials will carry over between your mobile version or your web version or your Android TV version. And so your user will be able to save their credentials on one and not need to sign in on multiple devices. Netflix has been our initial partner. So what happens here is that when you go into the Netflix application on TV, once you've signed in to your mobile device, you'll see a dialog that lets you know that you're signed into the Netflix account associated with the same Google account that you've used on your mobile devices. It's that easy. Now, for Google Cast, your credentials are probably already on your mobile device. So this feature works great when you've got multiple senders. For example, if I've got a tablet on my coffee table, I just pick it up, install the Netflix application. I don't even need to sign in. It'll automatically be, all of my credentials will already be there, and so it's smooth. Now, we talk about friction. We briefly talked about monetization before. So we all make great apps. Hopefully you do. There's some not so great ones, but we're going for the good ones. You have great content, but in the end, you got to pay some bills. And ideally, you'd like to make some money. So for your users, if you think that it's a pain to enter a credit card on your phone, it's crazy on the TV. But you've got to understand here that you've got all of the goodness of the Google Play Store, including your users' stored forms of payment, purchase histories, APIs for in-app billing, subscription. Everything's already there, so you could pretty much eliminate all of that friction. Whether it's building native apps running on Android TV directly, where you have the Play Store there, or for the apps for Cast that you're running on your mobile devices, either on Android or iOS, the friction of collecting payments is gone. Why? Because we're reusing existing technology. So in the screenshot that we have here, for example, from Hungry Shark's Evolution, a big time sink, I can buy gems to make my shark more hungry, and I can pay for it using my wallet or Play Balance here, as well as carrier billing that I might have set up already on my phone. So there's because it's Android TV, or if it's on Android or iOS, there's really no friction because we've already set up the payment system for you. Now, ads are also a great way where you're going to be able to monetize your application. In particular, video ads are something that TV watchers are very familiar with and are expecting. Now, because these are familiar on Android, iOS apps, your existing video ad solutions just work. If you're already using the IMA SDK to deliver video ads, regardless of what video server you're using, they just work. This is one of the biggest benefits of building on top of established platform. So here's a screenshot of YouTube where we show TrueView ads by building ads UI on top of our playback fragment. So what does this all mean for you? So we've talked about the living room ecosystem, and it's growing rapidly. And we believe, that's why we're betting on it, that there's huge opportunity there. Now, Google's providing solutions for the entire ecosystem to let developers like you take advantage of your existing applications and websites to easily get into the living room. If you've got an Android application and your interaction model benefits a game controller or remote control, then getting it up and running on Android TV is super simple. And with Razer, NVIDIA, and Sony releasing their devices, the size of the market is growing rapidly. If you're building or already have an Android, iOS, or Chrome applications and want to take advantage of multiple screens and speakers in the home, we have millions of Cast devices out there, and you could build some truly engaging interactive experiences that could take advantages of multiple senders at scale. So whether it's games, audio, video, or recipe sharing apps, or whatever you can imagine, it's really never been easier to get compelling apps on television. So whether you choose Android TV, Cast, or anything in our ecosystem, we've got plenty of support, and our DevRel team's really excited to get folks up and running as quickly as possible. You can find more information about developing for Android TV and Google Cast, and you can take a look at the following links. And you can also attend some of our Box Talks during I/O, or watch the Dev Bites online for Android TV and Cast on YouTube. If you've got any feedback, please provide it online. Thanks, everybody, for attending. We're out of time. We could take questions outside, but thank you. We really look forward to seeing what you guys come up with.